There are colors that speak louder than words. And in Korea, red whispers of death. To write a name in red ink is not a choice of style, but a call to the afterlife, a gesture once reserved for the dead, the condemned, or those whose souls had already crossed beyond. In a nation where history breathes through symbolism, red is more than pigment. It is a warning, a memory, and a scar of time. This is not merely about ink and paper. It is about how a color came to carry the weight of mortality itself. In the old pages of Korean history, ink was more than a tool. It was a language of spirit. Every stroke, every color, every mark on paper carried weight. Black ink belonged to the living, the writing of blessings, of records, of lineage. But red was something else. It was the color of blood, of endings, of curses whispered under breath. To write a name in red was to carve it into the space between life and death, a warning, a whisper that this soul had been severed from the world of the living. This belief finds its roots in ancient Korea's fusion of shamanic and Confucian traditions. Red ink, often made from cinnabar or crushed minerals, symbolized energy and vitality, the essence of life itself. Yet, paradoxically, it was used to repel evil spirits and to mark those who had crossed beyond life's boundary. In old village scrolls and burial records, the dead were written in red, the living always in black. It became an unspoken law, one that blurred the line between reverence and fear. Over centuries, the symbolism deepened. Red became both protector and executioner. It was used to draw talismans against demons, but also to write the names of the condemned. Soldiers going to war might see their names written in red, a reminder of the mortality that followed them like a shadow. This duality gave the color a haunting power. The more it was used to protect, the more it became tied to death itself. Today, that memory still lingers in Korean hearts. Few write names in red, not out of superstition alone, but out of inherited respect. It's a quiet understanding that colors can carry memory, that even ink can echo centuries of belief. What began as ritual now endures as reverence. And through that, the red pen still bleeds the past into the present. Long before ink met paper, red was already a royal color in Korea, a shade worn by kings, priests, and celestial messengers. It represented the sun, the source of life, and the divine right of rulers. In the grand halls of the Joseon dynasty, red silk draped the thrones of emperors, shimmering like captured firelight. To wear red was to embody authority, to stand as the bridge between the human and the divine. It was not merely a color. It was a proclamation of power, a visual hymn to the heavens. But even within that brilliance, red carried a quiet danger. Its brilliance was so potent that it was believed to attract not just attention, but spirits, wandering forces from realms unseen. The court shamans and scholars warned that the same hue which crowned emperors could also summon the restless dead. So red became sacred and forbidden in equal measure, permitted for ritual and royalty, but never for the common name. It was a color too alive, too fierce for everyday ink. When royal decrees were signed, vermilion ink marked the seals of the sovereign. These seals were said to hold divine power, turning simple documents into instruments of destiny. Yet outside palace walls, red ink found a darker purpose. In village temples, it was used to inscribe spirit papers, charms to ward off misfortune or bind malevolent ghosts. The same pigment that carried the emperor's will could also imprison a spirit in eternal silence. Thus, red became the language of both dominion and deliverance. This paradox, sacred and sinister, shaped Korea's enduring relationship with the color. To this day, red remains a symbol of dual truths, majesty and mortality, divinity and danger. And when a hand hesitates before writing a name in red, it is not fear of ink, but reverence for the power it once held, a memory of emperors and spirits intertwined, burning in the same eternal hue. When Korea was torn apart by war, the color red took on a new and haunting meaning. No longer the hue of emperors or the divine, it became the color of division, of ideology and blood. Across the peninsula, red banners fluttered under a new symbol, communism. To the south, red became the mark of the enemy, of fear, propaganda, and betrayal. The ink once sacred in royal courts now bled across wanted posters, execution lists, and wartime decrees. Red became a weapon of ink, not art. Families who had survived centuries of dynasties now trembled at the sight of a red mark beside a name. It meant suspicion. It meant death. In the early years of conflict, when loyalty was questioned and spies seemed to hide in every shadow, red ink was often used to cross out names of the condemned. One stroke, and a life vanished into history. The same pigment that once sealed royal decrees now sealed fates on the battlefield and in the dungeons of interrogation. Villages whispered of red letters left on doors, silent warnings to disappear before dawn. Teachers, poets, and farmers alike learned to fear the color. Even after the war ended, its echo remained. Red ink was no longer just a color, but a symbol of grief written into the national memory. Generations grew up believing that to write a living person's name in red was to curse them, to summon the same doom that had once stalked the war-torn streets. Thus, red transformed from divine to dangerous, from imperial honor to political dread. What had begun as the color of kings now carried the burden of ghosts, of a divided nation, and of names erased by history. The pen that once celebrated life had become the pen of silence. And in every Korean hand, that silence endures when it hovers over red ink, remembering the shadows of a war that never truly ended. In the heart of Korean culture, language is more than words. It is breath, lineage, and soul. Every syllable carries history. Every stroke of a name holds meaning. To write a name is to acknowledge existence. It is a sacred act that binds the living to their ancestors. But when that name is written in red, it is no longer a celebration of life. It becomes a farewell. The ink of vitality turns into a whisper of mortality, a symbolic bridge between the world of the living and the realm of spirits. This belief did not form overnight. Centuries of custom shaped it, a quiet understanding that colors speak louder than words. In everyday life, Koreans chose black or blue ink for communication, colors that represented neutrality and continuity. Red was reserved for the final record, the list of the departed, the gravestones, and the ceremonial scrolls of the dead. It became the color of endings, not beginnings. To see one's name written in red while still breathing was a chilling omen, a reminder that life, however bright, can be erased in an instant. Yet beneath this fear lies reverence. It is not the color that is cursed, but the intention it carries. Koreans have long believed that names possess spiritual weight. They are not mere identifiers, but living extensions of the soul. To misuse a name, especially in red, is to disturb that spiritual harmony. So even in modern times, when pens and pixels have replaced brushes and ink stones, the old instinct remains. The hand pauses before the red marker, as if the ancestors are watching. Through this quiet restraint, Korea preserves a profound truth, that words can give life, and colors can take it. The living speak in black and blue, the dead rest in red. Between them lies the delicate thread of respect, the language of the living, written with care, spoken with reverence, and guarded by tradition. Time, as it often does, has reshaped the meaning of symbols. Yet in Korea, red ink remains stubbornly timeless. Walk through a modern Korean city today, and you'll see LED lights and digital signs glowing crimson across glass towers. Yet no one dares write a living person's name in that same hue. Even in the sleek offices of Seoul or on the glowing screens of smartphones, that old instinct lingers, a silent pause before selecting the color red for a name. It's more than superstition. It's respect encoded into the national psyche. Schools and businesses continue to uphold this unspoken rule. Teachers mark papers in red, but when it comes to writing names, they instinctively reach for black. In family registers, digital forms, and even text messages, the caution persists, invisible but alive. For many Koreans, using red for a name still feels like crossing a spiritual line, a gesture that belongs not to the present but to remembrance. Technology has modernized everything else, but it has not erased memory. The past, it seems, still breathes in the ink of the future. And yet, red ink has also evolved. It's found a new role in art, design, and branding, symbolizing vitality, courage, and love. Young artists reclaim it on digital canvases, while companies use it to draw the eye, not to invoke spirits. The transformation is slow but steady, as generations learn to balance reverence with reinvention. Red is no longer the forbidden color. It is the color that demands awareness. When used wisely, it reminds rather than curses, honors rather than harms. But even in this modern reinterpretation, the old beliefs hum quietly beneath the surface. When a Korean sees their name appear in red, even on a glowing phone screen, something ancient stirs, a shiver of remembrance. It's not fear, but a recognition of continuity, that some symbols, born of history and ritual, refuse to fade. Red still speaks, not of death, but of the delicate thread between what was, what is, and what endures. Long before red ink carried the chill of death, it glowed with something sacred. In ancient Korea, where Buddhism shaped art, thought, and ceremony, red was not a warning, it was a blessing. Monks would trace the names of the faithful in red cinnabar ink upon prayer scrolls and temple walls, believing that the color itself held spiritual energy. It symbolized life force, a bridge between the physical and the divine. In those quiet temples, beneath the scent of incense and the dim flicker of lanterns, red was the ink of eternity. The Buddhist tradition saw color as vibration, each hue resonating with the spirit. Red, warm and powerful, was linked to compassion and protection. It was used to guard against demons, to bless names with vitality, to sanctify the written word. Yet, as centuries passed, the sacred meaning of red slowly transformed. When Confucian order and ancestral rites began to dominate Korean culture, red ink shifted from divine reverence to mortal remembrance. What once protected names began to mark them for the other world. The Buddhist sanctity of red was not forgotten, only reinterpreted by time. Even now, traces of that spiritual connection remain. Within the folds of temple banners and the painted eyes of guardian statues, red still glows as a living force, a reminder of balance between fear and faith. Monks continue to use it in sutra calligraphy, each stroke a meditation, each letter a pulse of mindfulness. Their red ink is not of death, but of awakening, a silent echo of the soul's endurance. And perhaps that is where the mystery of red endures most profoundly. It carries contradiction, life and death, fear and faith, reverence and remembrance. For Koreans, the Buddhist heart of red ink whispers that what we fear may also protect us. What we avoid may also sanctify us. The color of death, in truth, was once the color of enlightenment. And in that paradox, red becomes eternal, a reflection of spirit itself. In Korea, beauty and death have always shared the same stage, not as enemies, but as partners in meaning. The use of red ink embodies this duality perfectly. In ancient art and calligraphy, red was more than pigment. It was breath, emotion, essence. It adorned royal seals, poetry, and silk paintings with the same tenderness that it marked tomb tablets and ancestral scrolls. The same brush that traced the living also remembered the dead. In that balance, red became the aesthetic pulse of a culture, vivid, fragile, eternal. There is a quiet poetry in how red lingers in Korean visual tradition. The color appears in hanbok sashes, temple doors, and lacquerware, always commanding attention, always pulsing with meaning. Even in mourning, Koreans never fully abandoned beauty. The red ink that once marked names of the deceased carried both reverence and artistry. It was a symbol not just of loss, but of continuity, a final act of care rendered in color. To write a name in red was to give it beauty, even in its farewell. Yet the modern eye often forgets this nuance. Today, red is feared, avoided, misunderstood, a relic of taboo rather than transcendence. But beneath that fear lies a cultural truth, that death and beauty are bound by memory. Koreans, through generations, have never separated the aesthetic from the emotional. The ink that frightens now once illuminated temples, poems, and promises. The red thread of history runs through all, binding beauty to sorrow, color to silence. So when someone recoils at a name written in red, they are not just reacting to superstition. They are touching a wound older than memory itself. A reminder that art, color, and mortality are woven into the same tapestry. The red ink is not simply a mark of death. It is the signature of life's fragility, a haunting beauty that refuses to fade. Every culture carries its ghosts, but in Korea, memory itself feels alive, breathing through gestures, rituals, and colors. The fear of red ink is not just superstition, it is inheritance. For centuries, names written in red have echoed through family stories and ancestral ceremonies. Parents warned their children not to use the color, not out of myth, but out of remembrance. Each warning carried the weight of loss, the echo of war, and the whisper of tradition. In Korea, the past is not something left behind. It walks beside the living. Across generations, these silent lessons became a language of their own. Grandmothers whispering over calligraphy brushes, teachers correcting students who unknowingly write in red, elders pausing before signing a name, all perform acts of preservation. The avoidance of red became a cultural rhythm, pulsing quietly through time. It was not fear alone that kept the practice alive, but respect, a delicate acknowledgement of everything red had once meant. To resist writing a name in red was to honor those who no longer could. Yet, the younger generation now stands at a crossroads between remembrance and reinvention. In a digital world of neon lights and glowing screens, colors no longer carry the same weight. Red is used for emojis, alerts, and notifications, stripped of its old power, repainted as mere design. Still, somewhere beneath the touchscreens and keyboards, that ancestral echo hums faintly. The lessons of ink and color linger, even as culture evolves. And perhaps that is the beauty of memory. It adapts without fading. The taboo of red may no longer terrify, but it still teaches. It reminds Koreans and all who listen that history lives in the smallest details, in ink, in gesture, in restraint. Generations may forget the origin, but the instinct remains. Red still burns quietly in the national soul, not as a curse, but as a connection, a living thread between what was and what endures. As Korea strides into the digital age, the meaning of red begins to shift once more. On screens, it signals alerts, messages, and digital signatures, no longer a curse, but a pulse of life. Yet, within that glow, history lingers like an echo. The same color that once sealed the names of the dead now drives the rhythm of modern communication. It is a transformation both poetic and profound, a sign that even the most haunted symbols can be reborn. Beyond its superstition, red remains a language of emotion, of warning, of passion, of vitality. In art and design, Koreans embrace its power again. Temples still wear it in sacred wood, flags carry it in pride, and city lights blaze it across the night. The taboo may have softened, but the reverence remains. Red continues to demand respect, not for its danger, but for its history. In truth, to go beyond the color is not to forget its past, but to understand it. The fear of red taught a generation about humility before the unseen, about boundaries between life and spirit. Its endurance is proof of how cultures preserve meaning, not through permanence, but through adaptation. The red ink taboo is no longer a rule to obey. It is a mirror to see how far Korea has come. And so, as a nation balanced between tradition and innovation, Korea stands at a crossroad where history and technology meet in light. Red no longer belongs to death. It belongs to memory, to evolution, to resilience. It reminds the world that symbols do not die. They change shape, they change meaning, but their essence endures, carried forward, glowing softly, like a flame refusing to fade. And that is the story behind a single color, red, a color that once spoke of death, yet now burns as a symbol of rebirth. Here on Aftertime, we explore the echoes of history, the whispers of culture, and the hidden threads that bind humanity together. Because every tradition, every legend, every belief is a piece of the story of us. If you've journeyed this far, don't let it end here. Subscribe to Aftertime, like this video if it moved you, and share it with someone who loves to see the world through deeper eyes. There's always another untold truth waiting in the shadows of time, another forgotten chapter we'll bring back to life. So stay with us, because after every ending, there's always Aftertime.